Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we're here today with author Thomas Howard Riley. We're here to discuss his new book, The Monsters We Feed. Thomas, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Steve. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, well, first I want to thank you for the opportunity to receive an ARC for the book.
Hey, you
Uh,
bet.
thanks for thinking of me. I was a little nervous because I've seen how big We Break Immortals is. So
Yeah, I intentionally went the other way with this one to make it a little easier on you.
yeah, I think we to start off with some non spoiler stuff. So for someone who hasn't read We Break Immortals, can they read The Monsters We Feed?
Yes, yeah, they are unrelated stories that stand on their own, separate from one another. However, they do take place in the same world. There are some of the same world building elements, and there are some pretty snazzy Easter eggs for anybody who is a big fan of We Break Immortals. So they'll be able to get a little something out of it too.
So, when did you plan to write this book? Was it after We Break Immortals, or has this been around in your
Oh
brain
yeah,
for a while?
this was a kind of a weird one. This was a very spontaneous decision on my part. It was just after the release of We Break Immortals. I got really sick and went through the ringer for several months, and uh, and at the time I had been contemplating writing a novella,
Hmm.
as like a little thing, and I was trying to come up with ideas while I was taking a break from working on the sequel to We Break Mortals, and I kind of got this little idea that I thought would be a small enough idea where I could make it a novella. And I failed in dramatic fashion. I ended up making it 3 times the length of a novella. More ideas just kept adding on to it. So it was kind of a spontaneous thing. Uh, I had no idea I would be writing this as of March 1st of this year.
Hmm.
Not a clue. And then it just came out, and I just started writing it. It came out with the first draft I think by the end of April. I had an entire first draft run through of this story. So it just kind of came pouring out really fast, completely out of nowhere, total lightning strike. And then that was just it. So
Hmm. So, was kind of like being in the zone? Is that kind of what it sounds like? They just kind of happened for you?
yeah, I believe that. Yeah, because normally I do a lot of, I did a lot of the same things with this planning this book as I did with other books. It just happened so rapidly. Like I couldn't, normally it takes a while. I'm putting things together, putting plot points together, developing characters in my head while I'm, preparing to write a book. This one just all fell out. Like all the ideas just started tumbling out all
Hmm.
very quickly. So
Nice.
yeah, it was an unexpected uh, process.
So, for someone who isn't familiar with The Monsters We Feed, how would you describe it? What's the pitch for it?
Well, it's a dark fantasy noir style story in a medieval setting, but it's kind of it kind of flows like urban fantasy in a medieval
Hmm.
setting. But it's about a character who discovers a tool that allows him to see magic that is normally unseen in the world around him, and it opens up this whole other realm of his world that he was not aware of, and causes all manner of parts of his life to unravel.
You can say that, yeah, yeah, So, yeah. And the cover is very striking. Where did the idea for the cover come from?
Well, I had the idea. I'm kind of, you may have noticed if you've seen the cover for We Break
Oh yeah.
Immortals, and then the cover, there it is right there. I kind of have a a thing for behind the character view, seeing what the character is seeing, kind of like you're going along with the character. And so that was kind of like the vibe I was thinking of, but I kind of wanted to have it demonstrate the realm that he would be going into, the physical realm that he'd be going into, because not only does he delve into a world of magic and characters that he was not aware of, he also goes into a physical space in the city that he resides in that is not the safest and not the uh, most well trod area. And so I kind of wanted that to be kind of the centerpiece, because to me, the character and the city are completely, perpetually interlinked.
Hmm.
When it comes to the story, because the city is a huge part of the character's idea of himself, and he is affected dramatically by the things that happen in that city.
Yeah. The city almost seems like a character in itself in a way.
Yeah, that's I kind of was going for that, so I'm really glad that that really shined through. I wanted it to feel um, very much like it was a lived-in city, and that it was a
Mm.
place that existed, that people actually inhabited. It wasn't cardboard cutout. And I spent a lot of time on it to make sure that it came across that way. I wanted to make sure they have their own slang, that they have their own kind of way of thinking about things, and so on and so forth. I kind of intentionally tried to make this an anti We Break Immortals a
Mm.
large extent, because I tried to, instead of going large the way I'm going with the sequels to We Break Immortals, I wanted to shrink it down and try to go small and have a story contained in one physical locality.
Was that hard to do? To because I think fantasy readers and I'm sure authors are the same way. They have these really big ideas. So is it tough to kind of squeeze it down the way into a?
Mentally, yeah, for me especially, it is very difficult for me to not think on very grandiose terms as far as adventures, quests, you know, battles, empires fighting each other, things like that. Those are that's kind of my bread and butter. Um, but I think what helped me was trying to write something way smaller than what I ended up writing, because then my author, muse took over and kind of filled in. But because I started with such a small kernel of an idea, it didn't get too out of hand.
Do you see more books in this universe or in this world or in this storyline? These characters.
Yes, I've definitely been contemplating a couple of other ideas. In general, I have a lot of ideas for doing kind of standalones, independent stories to this one and to We Break Immortals, while I'm still continuing with that series, and just having, interspersing it with different things that take place in other areas within the world. So, but yeah, when I first started writing this, clearly I was not anticipating having any kind of direct follow up to it. But now it seems like it might be inevitable that I end up doing that, because the characters took on the lives of their own very quickly in the writing
Mm.
process. And when I, delved into these characters' heads, a lot of ideas have spawned that I was not able to fit into this particular story that may soon come up.
Because based on our previous conversations, I know you're very thorough. You're very detailed with the world building. So
Mhm.
I would assume there's a lot that you've built that you can more stories to be told after all the work you
Correct.
put in.
Yeah, it's one of the benefits of all the countless thousands of hours that I spent thinking up world building things and geographical things regarding this world, that I can just kind of like pick and choose where to go. And I already kind of have a fundamental starting point or baseline for other places. So when I'm thinking about what these characters are, their wants, their desires, and things that they've expressed in the story, and then I can project that onto my map and onto my, the cultural things that I've come up with, that haven't been touched on in either book before, and I can just, zoom in on one of those things and then begin the process again.
Yes. And Misspelled Jared's here. Hey, Jared, thanks for coming by.
Hi, Jared.
So, yeah. So lots and lots of stuff to talk about with this one. Lots of questions I have for
Yeah.
you. So I'll go ahead and put up the spoiler banner. So we'll be getting to some spoilers. So
Okay.
if you haven't read it, or if you don't want to be spoiled, then here's your warning.
Yeah, there may be some severe spoilers potentially.
Yes, yeah. So what I so during the book, Jathan really I was a little bit frustrated with him because I thought he would notice that it was his sister leaving the afterglow everywhere,
Hmm.
right? So, but he assumed it wasn't until later in the book when his sister confronted him or when they had that conversation that I realized it was just him, his own view of the world, and he automatically thought she had a
Hmm.
lover or she had someone she was seeing. So
He yeah
I
he
love that you did that. Yeah.
yeah, he did had his own mental model of the world, and as people do, when you
Hmm.
have made your mental model of the world around you, or of a specific thing, you tend to discount evidence to the contrary, and you know overemphasize evidence, flimsy as it may be, to fit your own predetermined worldview. So it was a tough fence to straddle to write that. So
Well, once you learn about him and their history and what the trauma they've been through, it kind of made sense that he had that really narrow view, and that's kind of what he stuck to.
yeah, I wanted to make a character who begins the story thinking they know absolutely everything there is to know about everything in the world around him, all the people he knows, the places that he knows, and then just one by one strip all of that away and make him realize that he, on a very fundamental level, had no idea what was going on in the world around him.
Did you have that planned from the very beginning, how the storyline would go?
Once I came up with that part of the story, yes. Like when I was first coming up with this idea, it's like I literally thought, okay, I had the idea of somebody finding the lens, the monocle that the specialists use to see the invisible magic around them. It was just that was the kernel of my idea, was to have
Mhm.
somebody stumble across it because one of the little world building elements that is part of this world is that those lenses, um, they're made of crystal minerals that are extremely expensive, like beyond their worth their weight in diamonds. So like it makes the investigators who go looking for magic uh, very it makes them targets for undesirable elements who may be after things of value for whatever purpose, for sale or for ill-gotten use. And that was and that doesn't even appear in We Break Immortals, that type of event. I mean, I
Mhm.
talk about how expensive the things are, but didn't go into that. So that was like a little tidbit of world building that I didn't even use in the story. It's part of
Mhm.
my, world building encyclopedia. And so I thought that would be a great idea to just take that and see what happens when somebody who's not supposed to have one of those finds them and then sees what happens. And then from there I was like, well, what's the story going to be? And then the story kind of I decided to follow the track of not just the ethereal realm being something that he discovers, but the actual real physical world and his own, the lies and other things around him being something else he discovers at the same time.
Mhm. I did pick up the after he finds a monocle, after Jathan finds a monocle, and the kind of that almost like a cat and mouse. It almost reminded me of like a late '80s, early '90s movie, like those movies that, there's like you have that constant fear of you're running from something, or they're looking for you, or you're hiding, and you
Mhm.
have that constant uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, I wanted it to have a very like once he discovered like the true dark nature of things there, which is pretty early on after he finds. I mean, because he knows it's kind of you can tell in the first chapter that he knows that it's not the safest city if you go outside of certain areas. The nickname for the river in the city is called the Float because of how often bodies are found floating in the river. So he's aware that it's not like but he's adapted to that type of situation. But once he discovers the real hyper dangerous darkness, infesting the city, yeah, it quickly becomes, you know, uh, that fear and obsession kind of animates him. And plus, not just that, once he starts seeing all of this stuff around him, it's like being in a bathroom in a hotel and then turning on a black light. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of that scenario where the world around you look perfectly clean, pristine, everything seems okay. Turn that light on, flick that switch. Suddenly, you're terrified. You don't want to touch anything. Like I wanted him to be experiencing that in the greater, realm of his city. Um, but yeah, that kind of sudden claustrophobic feeling where even though he's walking the same streets, talking to the same people, going the same places, it feels like his world has shrunken in around him, even though nothing physically has changed.
Mhm. I did pick up some Hobbit or some like Frodo the Ring vibes a little bit, because once he had the monocle and he realized what it could do, he became more and more attached to it. It seemed like.
Yeah, yeah, because it starts off he's initially thinking about he's basically pickpocketing the corpse at the beginning,
Yeah.
and he's out of curiosity, but also out of greed. He lives in a world where you kind of have to have your angle. You don't want to miss out on an opportunity for the next grift or the next easy score to give you a little bit of extra silver in your pocket. It starts off like that, where he's thinking, oh, I could sell this, I could make so much money. And then he kind of backs off when it's explained to him how difficult it might be to sell it, because how do you advertise that you have one of the most sought after items in the world, while authorities are trying to look for that missing device, and while all the criminal, so that gives him a stumbling block and gives him a pause. And while he's in that paused state of mind, he starts using it because his curiosity gets the better of him. And then it quickly spirals out of control. Like, because he becomes like addicted to finding these things and kind of knowing the world about him. It's kind of like almost like a surveillance junkie, like somebody who gets a spy cam for their house, starts watching it, and then suddenly they want to get a bunch more. And then they want to see where this neighbor's pet is doing and what's happening out here and where the neighbor's car. I wanted to have that kind of obsessive quality where it kind of takes over his life a little bit.
And it seems like a whole nother element, not only the afterglow or the magic users, but also the people in the city he may have noticed before, but now they become a little bit more real for him.
With regard to the people who live in the tenement lane area, yeah, because he's aware of the people in his immediate area, right? He's aware of the people that he does business with on a daily basis. He's aware of obviously his sister and their friends, his coworkers, the people they know from their neighborhoods, and then the magistrates that he works with. On the side. So he's aware of these kind of elements, but all the other parts of the city, he just has a picture of what they are from what it's not that he hasn't been to them. It's not that he hasn't gone through them, because part of the story, part of his superpower to a certain degree is like knowledge of where the streets go. Like, he can walk them in his sleep. And that's part of one of the things that's special about him, is just his own innate ability to keep track of the maze of streets. So it's not like he's not aware of the physical space, but he is blind to the people inhabiting those spaces. So he may know every twist and turn and tunnel and arch and bridge and switchback throughout the whole part of that labyrinthine city, but he doesn't really see the people. The people are cardboard cutouts to him. In the background, they're people for him to make scores on, people to walk past, but they don't really have identities to him because he doesn't ever interact with them. And part of what I wanted, it was him to suddenly be confronted in a very direct way by some of these people that he otherwise would never have even glanced at. They would have just been faceless, kind of invisible people to him.
Yeah. Things that have always been there kind of suddenly became visible all of a sudden for him.
Yeah, not just, I wanted it to be a parallel with the magic he's seeing and that he's obsessing about. I wanted there to be a parallel with discovering people and discovering his city and discovering secrets about his friends and family and discovering the truth about people at the same time. So I wanted it to be this multi-layered unraveling of all these ideas.
And the brother and sister relationship, where did that, were there any inspirations for that relationship? For
zero inspirations for that, other than just what's, just ideas bouncing around in my head. I did not base any of the characters really on any specific individual people, books, media dynamic. Their relationship just kind of came out of just the amalgam of thoughts in my head about the way that I wanted the brother or sister. I wanted them to have a really close relationship because obviously bereft of their parents, they become each other's anchors. And that's a big part of the story. So their relationship is very strong aside from the few key, they're hiding some monsters from each other. But aside from those, their relationship is quite good. They don't really argue until the monocle, until he finds that lens and it becomes an issue. They don't really argue. They get along. They go, to all the same places. They go out drinking every night. They're basically, people in their early 20s, having their day job and then going out to the bars at night and hanging out, walking the town, pub crawls, and all that good stuff. And everything seems fine until this stuff gets uncovered.
Mhm.
But yeah, I did not have a specific, I did not pattern them off anything. I have no idea where those characters came from within my head. That's part of the author in the zone type thing where it just kind of came out. These characters just fell out of nowhere.
Speaking of came out of nowhere, where did that first line come from? Because it's very catching. It catches your attention.
Oh,
Right away.
everyone's life changes the first time they find a dead body.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was I wanted it to right off the out of the gate. I wanted it to be uh, an introduction to the kind of noir idea of the city, where there's going to be a body, there's going to be murder, even though they're not specifically discussing that physically happening. They're just discussing it conceptually at the beginning of the book. I wanted to stand out that there's going to be something going on. There's going to be some harsh things happening in this world. And that just kind of came, it kind of came out of the dialogue that they were having. I like to try to pull my titles out of dialogue. That's where We Break Immortals came from as well. So I frequently discover the titles while I'm in the process of writing the books. I don't always write to title. I sometimes discover it along the way, or discover it during the world building, process or whatnot. But that's where that line came from, because I wanted to, I wanted it to show I wanted to showcase the defining line where it divides his life before from his life after. Because up until the point where he finds that body, if he just hadn't gone down to see that body, he and his sister would have continued on in this blissful ignorance that, because of their secrets, would eventually have probably, torn them apart in a very negative way anyway. But they would have gone on never having, he would never have experienced this other part of the city. He would never have had his eyes opened to the world around him, and been able to go through that change to himself and to his character. And he may have never discovered the truth about because the fact that his sister had magical powers that she was keeping from him, which must have been incredibly hard to do, to keep that kind of secret from your loved ones. But that's not the only secret that she knows.
Mm-hmm.
And if this story if it had happened a different way, if he hadn't have found that dead body, he may not have been able to be receptive to that truth ever. And he may have continued on being this angry, overly angry, very single-minded, there's one way to do things, my way or the highway kind of individuals, and never experienced that change. Because he's not a bad person to his friends and to his sister and the people he knows. He's not a jerk to them. Like he treats them very kindly. The people, like even the people that his sister works for, he's very kind to them, and he doesn't have any argument with them. It's just everything else in the world around him. He doesn't trust people. He doesn't trust outsiders. He is antagonistic towards everybody, evidenced by the number of barroom brawls that he gets involved with over literally nothing. So it's, but that part of him is the part that needs to change, is because that's leading him down a different path of destruction than the one that is in the book.
Did you always know what happened? Did you always have the storyline with the parents in your mind, or did that come about during the writing process?
Excuse me, sorry about that. That did kind of crop up a little bit later in the idea process, because the story kind of came about in layers, and I was trying to develop it in a way where there would be not necessarily not like a twist, but like him discovering something new at the end of every chapter. And so I was trying to I wanted to make sure I had enough ideas of the world to have something for him, another layer for him to sort of peel back to get closer to the truth that he ultimately is going to find. and I had always known that they were going to be that he and his sister were orphans, because that was part of their origin in my head for why they were as close as they were. But I had not figured out that twist early on in writing. That was about halfway through, where I realized that was going to be the really, really big twist.
What is that feeling like when you're halfway through and that realization, the light goes off? What is that like?
It is absolutely extraordinary, Steve. It is probably my single favorite thing. And sometimes it happens while you're writing. Sometimes it happens while you're in the middle of your pre-writing. You're outlining your work, your story crafting. Um, because I didn't just put pen to paper. I plan out some ideas. I have a lot of ideas bouncing around in my head. I do very loose outlines. I'm not like super detailed about it. But I like to come up with, what do I want to have happen in this chapter, and this chapter, and of course I go back and change things as it is. Like one of the thing, probably the last thing that was added to the story was the entire arc of him discovering the people in the depths of the city. That part of it, which seems weird because that's layered over across the entire story,
Yeah.
from the moment he first. I mean, obviously, the serial killer in the city, that whole element, and some of the twists, the twists involving the people that he thinks are his friends that are not actually his friends. They are his friends. They're not truly looking out for his best interest. He always had that. That was always in there. But during the writing of it, as I was discovering his own blindness to the people and places around him, it suddenly occurred to me that I was thinking of the story with that same blindness that he had. That I was thinking of this place that he was walking through without addressing the people in it. And so that was probably the last thing. And that clearly, that's from like chapter 3 to, the almost the very end. That element comes up, and that's a big part of his change is in that. And that was discovered about 2/3 of the way through the first drafting.
Oh wow!
And that was exceptional. That was exceptional discovery too on my part, because that's one of my favorite aspects of the story. That's one of the things that ends up humanizing him the most and makes him where he begins to have his humanity begins to overcome his prejudices and his worldview that is stubbornly trying to stay in his head. That's where that part of the thing is what ultimately allows him to be in the headspace to accept the secrets that his sister ends up telling him. Which he still doesn't take very well,
No.
clearly, based on what happens and what he does. But he would have taken it a lot worse, or been a lot more dismissive, or whatnot, without having experienced that humanizing of the magic users.
Yeah, I love his reaction to it too. And all of it made sense. All the characters, they all made sense. Even towards the end when he starts to realize what's really happening and he gets the big revelation from his sister, all that made sense for the characters.
Yeah, I was really going for that. And I also I because I'm a big fan of Inception, I also have that little bit at the end where I leave it a little ambiguous as to whether he actually saw what he saw when his sister was dragging him out of there. So I did leave that open-ended there, but yeah, that was probably my favorite part of the story, was him discovering those things in the city and really getting into that realm and finding out, because it was kind of filling out in my head how the story went as it was filling in that character. So I was almost like I was on this journey with him in a certain regard, discovering the story parts as he's discovering the city.
So yeah, that's actually on my list. I was going to ask you about that. If you meant to leave that ambiguous, or if you're just kind of playing with us readers.
Yes, that I intentionally did leave that ambiguous. Actually, if I really want to blow your mind, did Jancy and any of those people exist at all, or was that all in his
Oh,
head? So, but I that's just me messing with you. or
Okay.
am I?
Or are you? Yeah.
But
Nice.
I did leave that part at the end a little bit ambiguous because it may have been what he actually saw, because it was what he and Jesse talked about at their last meeting. And so that could be what's happening, or if you want to think it, you can think that it was just him having a fever dream from shock and trauma and blood loss, that he was just imagining what he hoped would happen from what he was doing. We'll see. Maybe we'll find out.
Damn you, Thomas! You just changed my whole perception of the whole book. Just
Yeah. So, but we'll see how that goes. I'll leave that ambiguous for now. But yeah, that little ambiguous bit was intentional, because it on the one hand, it does seem a little over the top type of situation to occur, but based on what you've already seen from those characters in there, there are characters that have pretty badass magic, and the thing that was holding them down was this uh, extremely badass serial killer monster child hunter, you know, uh, individual in the city, that's not allowing them to thrive, not allowing them to flourish, because he's a constant terror to them. He's like at one point she even says that it's like living with a dark god, just absently wandering your streets, and you pray you don't run into him.
yeah.
You know, and so they're living their whole lives like that. And so to a certain extent, it seems, because there are characters that do what those characters do in that scene, where they show up and chase away some of the gangers there. But on the other side, it does seem a little over the top too. So when you're thinking, God, is this really happening, or is this just him happily imagining it? So maybe someday we'll find out the truth. And in addition to that, I will point out there is an alternate ending to the story.
Oh, there is.
There is an alternate ending that is slightly different. It's and the decision on which ending to do came down to the moment that I submitted the manuscript.
Wow.
So it was. I had two complete versions of the book, and I was looking at them side by side, trying to decide which one to submit as the manuscript, and I decided at the last minute which one the ending would be.
So the other ending is...
The other ending is a substantially more tragic, but still fulfilling, but much more tragic in its ending. But it didn't leave open the possibility for other interesting ideas that I started to have in that moment about where things could go, because I always had a plan to go forward. Like about the time I was finished drafting it, I decided that this might be an interesting story to continue. Maybe not with the exact same characters, but maybe bring one character on, or two or something, and move them through a different story with after this. But I wasn't sure which characters would make it through or not, and that was kind of the dilemma. Because I'm known for killing off people quite a bit. So there could have been a substantially higher body count than what there ended up being.
Will we ever get to read that alternative ending? Or
I may end up posting that as a treat at some point on my website. Maybe I'll do it as a newsletter teaser at some point, so you can see how the alternate would have been.
How hard is that when you have these ideas brewing for future stories, but you kind of feel like I should kill this character off? How hard is that, to where should I kill this character, or should I keep
my
going?
normal MO is when in doubt, throw them out. Like, if I can't decide, if it's a toss up, kill him. It's basically like tie does not go to the runner in my mind. So it was a little bit more than a tie at the end that shifted me away from that. Because if I truly was like, oh, I don't know, I would have killed everyone. As long as it serves the story, like the way that I the way that I take out characters, I do it to serve the story or serve the character development. I don't just wantonly massacre people in these stories without it, serving a greater point, like providing tears for readers as they go forward through the story. Um, but it has to be part of the story. It's not just like, oh, yay, we survived. It's the end. We made it, and then the last bad guy jumps up and kills somebody at the last moment. I don't like to do stuff like that. I like to have it serve the story and not have it just for its own sake.
Mhm. So I wanted to ask you about the love scenes in the book. How hard are those to write? How hard to kind of set them up and to execute them? Are they tough?
Okay. Well, on the one hand, they're not. I wouldn't say they're hard to write.
Mm.
I would say that they are extremely difficult to execute the way that I want them to go in my mind. Like with it's extremely easy to screw up that kind of scene, uh, and take you out of the story.
Mhm.
Word usage becomes much more specific in those situations because you can't pull your reader out of the story. Like you want to avoid that as much as possible.
Mhm.
So you don't want them to be pulled away by jarring, terminology. So you want to keep in the tone of the world that you have built when you're going through those scenes. And you also want to walk a fine line because you want it to be. I don't put those kind of scenes in unless I'm trying to develop the relationship between the two characters, or to show the how the characters, like, develop the characters themselves individually, preferably both, if I can pull that off. Like, I want there to be something you learn about the characters through that, to have that be in the story. And so I probably pay more attention to those than pretty much any other part of the story, as far as specific word usage and the specific way that those flow. So yes and no. I know that's kind of an ambiguous answer, but the way that writing them kind of flows pretty well. But I do a lot of revising and passes to double check the verbiage and everything that's being used in them.
There was a big change from uh, one of those scenes, and then they kind of get caught with their pants down, literally, right?
Yeah, the
So
chapter
yeah,
even opens with him with his pants around his
yeah.
ankles. Yeah, it's a big shift in the mood, for sure. And that's the scene that next scene is the scene that forces him to make a choice,
Mhm.
as well. And that's one of the reasons, story wise, where that happened. And that's a very scary moment in a story, when you're backed into a corner, and it's hard to be more vulnerable than when you have your pants around your ankles.
Yeah.
Um, that's when you do not want to run into your enemies, is at that moment. And so it was that moment where he decides, okay, I'm going to give up this thing. I'm going to give up this, because up until that point he is almost fixated on the lens, the crystal lens, the Jekyll monocle. He's almost fixated on that so much that he is like, I'm never giving this up. I'm going to
Yeah.
follow people forever. I want to know when there's magic around me at all times. I want to hunt these people. I want to turn people in. I want to find a way to monetize this. And beyond monetizing it, he just wants to see it. Like, the
Mhm.
monetizing becomes separate. Like, his whole concept of having a grift or having an angle, or a way to make extra money, goes out the window at a certain point in the story, in favor of obsession. Because at a certain point, they're like coming to him like, hey, turn somebody into us, turn somebody in, so we can, we'll give you money, but we need you to turn somebody in so we look good,
Yeah.
because it's starting to look a little dry around here, without us turning somebody in. Um, and at that point, he has turned his back on making extra money. It's just using it solely to service his own obsessive desire to see these people, to experience them, to have that special feeling of being able to see something nobody else can see. It's like if you gave a kid night vision goggles, and then let him run. A kid who likes to run, a teenager who likes to run around at night when you sneak out of the house when his parents are there and run around in the dark. Imagine giving that kid night vision goggles. Like, they would just become obsessed with seeing all the stuff that they could say, oh my God, I got to go see all this thing. That was kind of how his mind was adapting to having that thing. And up until then, he's still thinking like, I'm never going to get rid of this. Like, I'm going to keep this thing. I want to keep doing this and keep spiraling further into darkness with this thing. But his care for his friends and lovers, the people that he loves in his life, is the only thing that could overcome that obsession that he's in at that moment. And that's the first switch right there, where he starts to recover some part of his humanity and his self, is when he realizes he needs to take care of his people. He needs to take care of the loved ones in his world, and that's more important than this thing. How he's going to do that, he'll figure it out, and obviously things do not go well. He gets her and himself out of that trouble in that moment, but at what cost? Because it ends up leading to a completely different place that is also infinitely darker.
Where did the idea for the monocle come from? Where did that kind of originate?
The monocle is one of the first things that I ever world built, ever. Before We Could Break Immortals was We Break Immortals. I had thought of the idea of having that because I'm obsessed with the concept of being able to track and hunt down magic users. That's like one of the focuses of my stories, because I think I wrote an essay or a blog post or something about it. How I always used to watch shows or read books with magic in them, and I was like, how would this society actually function? Knowing that they're like, sure, Gandalf's nice today. What if Gandalf becomes senile? What if he gets drunk one day? What if he hits his head and suddenly he has a darker personality? What if he has a medical affliction or some kind of mental issue, and suddenly, like, do you still want somebody around with that much magical power who could? So I always like had those thoughts swirling around in the back of my head, and the idea of it started with my obsession with like heads up displays and like Predator vision, Terminator vision, from those early 80s movies again. Yeah. And being able to see things in different realms. And that's where I got that the lenses that go over it and give you
different filters,
different, slightly different hued crystal lenses that display different parts of magic, kind of like a lens that shows ultraviolet light, a lens that shows infrared light, one that shows X-rays or whatever. I wanted to have it be similar to that kind of thing. And so that predated, having that kind of lens predated even We Break Immortals. That was like one of my first things.
I love the idea of hunting magic users. It's almost like if Superman really existed, what would we really think about him? Kind of like that.
Right. Yeah. And that was my love of late 80s, early 90s comics really shines through, because I actually was not a huge fan of Avengers, the comic books. I was obsessed with the X-Men universe of comic books.
The mutants.
So I was not collecting Captain America comic books and Avengers and Thor and Hulk comic books. I was, getting X-Force, X-Factor, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men. I was getting all those types of stories, and those very seriously follow the ideas of how does society react to you as a person with special powers. And I was very drawn to that early on, because I felt that went really deep into thoughts that I was having in my own head from when I was reading The Hobbit, like when I was like 10. So I really like that idea. And as you'll see, I built a huge world. Like if you go on my website, I put up, I had Thomas Ray make some glorious maps of my world where they're almost Atlas style, showing the whole world. I mean, you can see a couple of them up there, but I have like 5 or 6 more that like are zoomed in on some of those places in that world. And there are a lot of places for me to look at, a lot of cultures that I've developed, and
Hmm.
a lot of them, and they all have their own different, very specific way of dealing with magic users. And some of them are extremely harsh way of dealing with them. Like if you thought that the way they handle them in Colchin was harsh, wait until you see some of these other places. But
Oh. Have you read Irredeemable, the comic thing by Boom Studios?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. As a matter of fact, yes. That's and then don't they have a sister comic,
Incorruptible or something
Incorruptible
like
or
that.
something like that? Yeah,
Something like that.
where it's the from the point of view of one of the villains or
Mm-hmm.
something. It's showing his story. Yeah, that I love that. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. That's exactly the kind
Yeah.
of dynamic that I'm thinking about, and clearly somebody else was thinking about because they made that comic as well. You know, what would happen if Superman legit went crazy? What if he
Yeah.
went bad and this unstoppable, person? And that's the reason that I came up with render tracers in uh, Lumina World. That's the reason that they're there. They're to and of course they don't do it alone. They have teams.
Yeah.
Obviously one man can't do it. They have to have teams. But I created that way where somebody can like block magic or whatever. And that was one of the key reasons why is because of my interest in hunting and tracking magic users and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's reminding me of Irredeemable as I was reading this one, kind of how they saw magic users and how they treated them, and but they were afraid of them. So
Correct. Yeah, it's
yeah,
kind of like you know you're fine with your neighbor across the street, but you're not fine with your neighbor across the street if they have a bazooka. Like because even if you're best friends with your neighbor, I don't know if I'd trust any of my best friends to own a bazooka. Like the opportunity for you to you only have to mess up once with a bazooka, uh, and it can cause problems. So, and that's kind of how people view magic users in this world. And they're like I said in Colchin, they turn them in, but they do mention in Colchin, in other places in Amagon, you can get registered as a magic user. You can, because this is in kind of a hot late medieval, early Renaissance level of
mm,
technology, with a few exceptions, because there's technology imbalances because of again people being so afraid of magic users that some organizations suppress knowledge of physics
yeah,
and of geometry and chemistry because they don't want because that's kind of how magic works in this world is you're basically hacking the physical laws to tweak things the way you want. So there are people who we don't want this person discovered how to make steam powered vehicles. We're going to go ahead and suppress that because we don't want anybody to know how to make those kind of things, just in case somebody who knows magic, who has the ability to like tweak those things, can then know, because you can't tweak things if you don't know how they work.
yeah,
In this world, you have to you have to have innate knowledge of how heat transfer works in order to be able to control it. You have to, which is why most of the magic users just create shapes and
yeah,
put mass and velocity, mass and speed, and direction into them because that's what they can comprehend. Those are easy things to comprehend. In We Break Immortals, it goes a little bit more in depth, and as those stories go on, where if you get knowledge of how gravity works or how electricity works or how like you can start doing all kinds of stuff that can cause mayhem and whatnot. And so there are some cultures that believe in burning that knowledge
mm,
entirely. And then but back to my original point, in Amagon you can be documented basically, where you present yourself to authorities who will then you show them your magic in front of render tracers so that they can copy down how strong you are and copy
mm,
down the kind of things you can do. Kind of what my character Aaron does in uh, We Break Immortals. He follows serial killers and like documents that stuff to try to catch them. The problem is if you don't have that information already, the only way to collect it is to collect it from the people they have massacred. So the benefit of being um, documented in that way is that you the render traces already have all your stuff. they have your pattern, they have your thing, they have the way to track you, they know exactly what you can do, they know how strong of a shield they need to carry to protect themselves from the projectiles you can send them, that kind of thing. They know exactly everything about you. So on the one hand, it limits you as a magic user, but it allows society to accept you because they know if you screw up or if you try to pull some shit, they will be able to take you out instantly because they already have everything they need to know to hunt you and get you. And so that's kind of like the trade-off that Amagon and some other societies have worked out in this world, is where they'll do that. And then you can run into problems with that too, though, of course, because the people who get documented tend to be the people with the most money, tend to be the people with the most connections, and tend to be the people who have friends who can tell render tracers to buzz off even if they do some dark shit. And I have a standalone story planned about that kind of thing as well, coming up. But yeah, I forgot where we started this particular train of thought, so I hope we went in the right direction and that we're still kind of on track with your original point. But yeah, that part of it, that whole realm of hunting and tracking and catching the magic users is a huge thing for me.
I love that part. Our friend Jonathan is here. Bazooka, maybe launch codes. Yeah. And the phrase "hold my beer" comes to mind.
Yep.
And Jonathan asks, any central themes?
In this particular story, obviously there's a theme of obsession, of having an idea of the world around you, and having that change. It's changing mindset from where you start, and it's really about looking at things you look at every day and not seeing them. Going through your life, seeing things, getting back to that idea about the mental model, like your model of your idea of the world around you, and overcoming that, and seeing that there might be other points of view, seeing that there might be other ways to see the world, and things that you might be missing, and things that you might be doing that might be affecting other people that you don't even realize. And that's a big thing. And obviously, like, family is an important aspect of it. But just getting over yourself is a big theme of the main characters in all of my stories to a certain extent. My characters are their own worst enemies in a lot of ways. The main villain of the story, Seber Gedeker, the serial killer, is not even really a traditional villain. He's more of like a monstrous force that's just there. It's like if he was obsessed with stalking a man-eating lion through the bush. It's really him having problems that are causing his problems, and it's when he gets over himself that he's able to finally, hopefully, get out of all the problems he got himself in.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did think the serial killer almost felt like if you play a video game, like there's this monster that just roams this area, and you just never know when you're going to run into him.
Yeah, correct. I just saw somebody playing through on God of War where they run into somebody doing that. But yeah, it's very much like that. It's very much. So it's not a traditional hero-villain relationship. It's the character trying to get, and you find out, like, the solution to all his problems was there from the get-go. If he hadn't been had his head so far up his ass to not see it, like, because he spends the whole book avoiding Torrance Sarker the whole time. Like, every day he's like, oh god, he's coming here to look for me, I gotta get away. And then when he finally talks to the guy's like, oh yeah, I'm not here to mess with you, I'm here to solve your problem. Like, so he spent all this time and got himself and his friends and family in so much trouble because he was too thick-headed. He was too obsessed with his own hatred of outsiders, that he couldn't see that was there, waiting for him basically the whole time.
I almost I had a theory when I was reading. I almost sent a message to you, but I was convinced until the very end that Jathan's sister, I'm really bad at the names, Lyra, that his sister was not only magic user, but that she accidentally killed her parents or their parents.
Oh, that's I can see how you would think that. Yeah, I wanted it to be. Um, Actually, there's somebody else who said they thought that Seber was actually Jathan himself, and that he was just
Oh,
doing a Tyler Durden scenario, which did not turn out to be the case. But
hmm.
if you're seeing it for the first time and not spoiling it right now, that is a thought that's possible for people to have and take away from it as well. Because and I think somebody else thought that maybe Jathan had killed his parents and just
Hmm.
buried the memory. But yeah, that's I wanted you to have those thoughts, Steve. I wanted to have people wondering until the last minute what the heck the the uh, the twist is, because the sister thing is something that I telegraph fairly early.
Hmm.
I mean, if you're not looking for it, you might miss it, but I try to like build it up. Um, and keep it going to that point. But that is not the actual twist. Like,
Right.
so I have a first. Actually, there's two big additional twists, because there's the one where he talks to the sister to find out the truth, and then there's the one where he's talking with uh, the magistrate, and he
Hmm.
finds out the other secret truth about how he has been contributing to the destruction of untold lives without particularly realizing it. Um, at the end, that was another one. So I wanted to have the sister one be there so that it'd be on everybody's mind, so that when they solve that one, they won't be looking for these other ones. They won't
Hmm.
see as clearly what these other twists might be. Because that's a big. I mean, every author faces that when they have twists, because they want to make it, foreshadowed enough that it seems natural, but they don't want it to seem so foreshadowed that it's just like, oh yeah, I knew in chapter 2 that this is what you were going to do.
Yeah.
Whoop the freaking do. Like, who cares? So you're always trying to walk a fine line with that. So I'm glad I was able to keep a couple of aces up my sleeve, at least for the end. And the key to doing that is really just leaving a lot of possibilities open and
Hmm.
not squashing any possibilities. So the worst thing I could have done was to have squashed the idea that his sister could be the killer or that he could be the killer. I did The worst thing I could do is like have some kind of evidence to prove that they could not have done it. Because then that would have ruined the ability for you to have those thoughts or other, have different theories and whatnot. But I would not have spoiled it for you if you messaged me about it. I promise.
Okay.
So
Because
you can
I
you can you can definitely feel free to do that. But yeah, and that's not a unreasonable thought to
hmm.
have, because that is actually what happened to a character in We Break Immortals. That was
Hmm.
something that happened. Which I don't telegraph that at all in We Break Immortals. In fact, I hid that through like little pieces of stuff. I won't tell which character, or if it's just one character, I won't tell you. But I did hide little things throughout the story so that you can put together, if you really really wanted to find it,
Hmm.
that was a situation that occurs. And that's another reason why magic is scary, because if you discover or are suddenly able to use it when you're a child,
Hmm.
how do you keep that under control? Um, when you're that small or whatnot. But yeah, that's funny, because that's literally what happened to a character in my other book.
Huh. Yeah, because she tells him things like, "You don't know what you're talking about," or "you." So I thought maybe it was something he repressed that he just
Mhm.
was trying to forget about, and then she actually killed them. But yeah, I was convinced that's what it was. But
Mhm. Yeah, it could have gone any number of ways, and to a certain extent, like he had the ability to know what the truth was, but he
hmm.
chose not to see it. It didn't turn out to be exactly a repressed memory.
Hmm.
It was just that he saw it that one way, and then when he was separated from his sister for however long they were separated after the event happened, um, and had a lot of other mouths, you know, talking about their ideas of what had happened to his parents, that he developed that idea in his own head and was unable to see any other way, um, to find the truth. Like, I really wanted to make a really thick-headed dude, but that you could really, I guess, understand why he was thick-headed and understand how those ideas got built up and how those prejudices got built up within his mind at the same
Hmm.
time.
Yeah, I think and the realization of realizing that his sister didn't want to live there. She always wanted to leave, and he was almost keeping her there, and she was always trying to get away, and he just
Yes.
selfishly kept her around, not realizing that that's not what she wanted. That's just what he wanted. That's what he
Right. Yeah.
expected.
I think in the first chapter, he's like, she brings that up.
Yeah.
And you can tell it, and how and she talks about it later in the book. You find out that the reason why she does that is because he has a temper and has a tendency to go
Mhm.
off and get in fights or arguments if you know try to convince him of something that he doesn't believe in. But she brings it up in like the first chapter, and he was like, ha ha ha, yeah, whatever, ha ha, big joke, little sister or big
Yeah.
sister, big joke, big joke. We're not really going to do that, ha 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 ha. He kind of dismisses her out of hand, and she doesn't push it. But you find, so it might lead you to believe, okay, maybe she's not that. And it's only later where you find out. I think when he's talking with Nessa, where she's like, yeah, she wants to get out of here so bad. She
Yeah.
hates this place. She hates the house. And the reason she doesn't keep pushing you about it is because every time she does, you blow up.
Yeah.
And so when you talked with her in, way back in chapter 1, of course she was dancing around those ideas, because if she confronts you with those ideas, really you'll freak out. And so it's like you kind of see how, like, through the whole story, like Lyra was trying to, like, slowly infuse thoughts in his head about, oh, magic is not so bad, maybe living here isn't that great, let's talk about these things, trying to, like, massage those ideas into his mind without, because if you step just 1 foot over the line with an idea with this guy, it's going to make him run fully in the opposite direction, because
Mhm.
he's so yeah, I did a lot of that. I'm glad you noticed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I think we've all had those moments where we realize that we've just been blind to everything that's going on around us because for our own selfish reasons. I think that's something that everybody can relate to at some level.
Yeah, I in a lot of ways, a lot of the things these characters go through, like I almost describe it as a slice of life, like a fucked up, murdery slice of life, uh, because in a lot of ways, the things that these characters are going through, the emotions, the knowledge that they gain, the lies that they keep, the secrets they keep, are a lot like the things that we do in our own lives. And, like, how can we tell our loved one that this thing that they're doing is just really hurting us without them freaking out about it?
Mhm.
Like, so I wanted it to be a very, very down to earth human, even though there's magic, serial killers, people with all kinds of wild powers and stuff in it. I wanted it to be very down to earth as far as the emotions and the characters and the thoughts they were having. So,
A murdery slice of life.
yeah.
That's a great blurb. Murdery slice of life. Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I kept me guessing to the very end, and I like that we get to know the characters more and more, and we start to realize that he's just been blind to all these things, and um, his temper and the way that no one wants to really confront him with these issues. I thought all that when you realize what's been really happening the whole time, I was like, oh, okay, like it's a hard truth sometimes.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed it is. But yeah, so uh, it's very much a challenge book that I wrote, where I intentionally wanted to write it different from the story that I am telling in We Break Immortals, um, and attack it a different way.
Mhm.
Obviously, I made the main character very much an everyman kind of person, where you know, he doesn't have anything special about him. Like, he's not a swordsman, doesn't own a sword. He's not some special guard or a knight or a lord or the descendant of some long lost, family. Like, he's just a regular person who just happens to inhabit this world. And I wanted to make a story where where they just stayed in one place and explored that space and didn't go on a quest or an epic adventure against some evil. I wanted to stay within the character and within their head, and that was very hard to write a character without a sword, because
Hmm.
or without some kind of magical power. I mean, he does have his own things about him that make him special, that help him to, overcome the things in the story. But I had to come up with those things. Like, what are those things going to be? If he's not a magician or a person who is good at sword fight, obviously he's good at fisticuffs, but that's a different thing. He's not, he's not a warrior. He's just a fighter. And he's not somebody who can track magic or do anything special. Like, he doesn't have the training. He just has the tool. You know what I mean? It would be like just finding a black light at a crime scene and being like, okay, what do I do now? That kind of scenario. And so I tried very much to make him, that was my challenge that I set for myself when I was making this. And it definitely still came up with quite a bit of story out of it. But I ended up making the things that are special about him things that he is only special at because his sister had magic. And because part of what they talk about when she reveals that, he discovers that truth, and then they talk about it when they finally sit down to talk about it. It's revealed like the reason he pushed himself to run faster was because she was cheating the whole time whenever they used to race against each other by giving herself a little bit of boost with her magic. And to try to compete with her, he pushed himself, his normal physical, just regular human self, that much more. And as you read the story, you find out that running for your life is something that comes in very handy. Being able to run very fast while still keeping your wits, because at one point he's like trying to look through the lens while he's running, trying to follow it, choose which turns to go. And the other thing, his ability to memorize the labyrinth of streets, because there are different parts of this city, but down in the city center is these big tenements, which are basically like giant, kind of like what they had in Roman times, where they have just big blocks with many homesteads in each one, and these are these giant 4-story things. So there's no way to get a high vantage. You can't climb a roof and see where you're going. This is very much a maze that you're going through. And the reason he was good at doing that was because when he tried to race his sister from one side of the city to the other, he could take a shortcut by knowing which ways to go through this part of town and get there, because she had no clue how to get through that. So she would just run the long way around to get to where she was going. And those two things that he's good at, he's only good at because she had magic. And so part of his discovery is not just discovering that she has magic and trying to come to terms with that. It's also coming to terms with the fact that the things that I am the best at, the things that I'm better than anybody else at, because he's good at fighting clearly, but the things that he's better than anybody else at is these things that are a direct result of him having to compete with her because of her magic. And the him knowing his way around is the only reason that that Sarker comes to him. He's like, this is the reason I came to look at you, is because we can't, we have these tools and stuff, and we still can't get through this maze of streets to follow our prey. We can't do it without you. So, but I wanted those things to come from his sister's magic to I really wanted to tie everything in this story and make sure that everything was connected in that way. So it went all out kind of within the framework that I had, but it was very much solving. It was a lot of problem solving in the story, because going outside of your comfort zone, which is exactly what this book is for me, is way outside my comfort zone in a lot of areas. It definitely leads to inspiration. And challenging yourself like that as a writer is it's tough, and at first it may seem annoying, but it can really make things as you're like, well, what am I supposed to do about the sword thing? It makes these ingenious little things come up that can inform the story and make the story better, and even tie it into itself and whatnot.
Well, you changed my whole outlook on the book now with your possibilities now. So
yeah.
It's driving me crazy. So
that's somebody said the same thing about the whole Jancy thing. They're like, So
I'm gonna just go reread that section again just to see if I can pick up on anything. Since you won't tell me, you won't tell us what the.
I am very careful with my word choices, both in this book and in We Break Immortals. We Break Immortals is a lot more wordy and has a lot more things going on in it, a lot more characters and plot and everything. Obviously, it's a 3-point of view, whereas this one is a single point of view. But I do choose my words very carefully. So, yeah, that's my version of if you don't see the body, they're not dead. If I choose my words very carefully about how I describe situations. So if I don't explicitly say something happened or didn't happen, then it's up in the air.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, you got me. So, but but thanks for coming by to chat with me about it. It's been.
You bet. Yeah. That is awesome.
Yeah. Had a lot of questions for you, and that ambiguous portion I was hoping to get it out of you,
but we'll see. You'll learn in the future, I'm sure. Or will you? Yeah. But there tentatively, I do have ideas floating around for a possible sequel to this. It's different than We Break Immortals in that We Break Immortals was going to always have a sequel. I already had all those ideas. This one, I completely finished the story before even contemplating that. So it's still any ideas for that are still in their infancy, but there are some that keep bubbling up despite my best intentions to try to keep this as a standalone. They just keep creeping in, and I keep trying to force them down, but that's the way it goes.
Kind of like when you planned on it being a novella, and it just kind of
pretty much. I'm going to try again with another novella idea. This time I'm not going to have them leave a single room for the entire story, and see if I can make sense of that. And if I can keep that as a novella, that's my next novella. My next novella tries to limit it to one room. First, I shrank it from going through the whole world down to just one city. Now I'm going to try just one room and see if I can do kind of a cross between The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and 12 Angry Men. And Night of the Living Dead, kind of a kind of a mishmash of those kind of ideas into a single room, and we'll see that. If I can't do that, not sure where to go from there.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading that one. That sounds like an interesting.
Yeah, that's another idea I've got coming up. I've already actually plotted out pretty thoroughly my take on that. I'm still worried though that I might overshoot novella length again, but I'm going to try really hard this time.
Well, looking forward to getting a grubby little hands on it when it's ready.
Excellent.
Yeah. So if someone wants to connect with you or check out the book, where is the best place to find you?
I am, on my website is thomashowardriley.com. It has links to everything on it. It has other world building stuff, information about We Break Immortals and the monsters we feed. I'm also on Twitter. I'm at Ornithopteryx on Twitter, and I do share a lot of stuff there. And I also have a newsletter where I reveal information. And on Instagram, I'm Thomas Howard Riley on Instagram as well.
So with all the recent Twitter stuff that's been going on, just social media in general, newsletters are important. So everyone go sign up for the newsletter and get some goodies. Yeah, really
magnified how useful it is. Whenever there's information insecurity or uncertainty, it's always good to have a backup or a direct connection to your people. And you have the side benefit that I do not spam you with newsletters. I try to keep newsletters to quarterly or only before big releases, so it's not something that I spam people with either.
Yeah, so
and I try to jam pack it with goodies too. I don't just do an open-ended blogathon on it.
Yeah. So it's really important to go check it out and get some goodies and get some news. And
there's a sign up right on my website for newsletter as well.
And the book is available now, so go buy it. It's available on ebook or paperback. Yep. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yep, got it right here. And they have it both on paperback and hardcover.
Oh, nice.
If you want to get it that way.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And of course, it's on Amazon as well.
Awesome. So I'll add all those links down below so everyone can go check them out. But thanks again, Thomas. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and thanks again for offering to let me read the book early. It was a great great pleasure, and it's always like talking to you, so it was a good excuse to come and chat.
Yeah, well, thank you for reading it, and thank you for having me on.
Of course, anytime. So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll talk to everyone soon.